Well, if you listened to the cast before, you know I love a gimmick. Why do one episode based on a calendar date when you can do two? What could I do with April? Flowers are blooming, buds are blossoming, grass is growing. What's that smell? Welcome to the Oktoberfest podcast. I'm pretty sure I'm still Jeff, your host and curator of cannabis cinema, and this is 420 Fest. 420, a time and date that means absolutely nothing to everyone except a specific subset of underachieving, memory-deficient, delinquent sons of bitches. It's rumored that 420 was the California police code for marijuana smoking in progress, but it's not. Apparently, the connection between pot and 420 started in the 70s when a group of high schoolers started meeting at 420 to hunt for a mythical lost treasure crop of cannabis, which they never found. That this has become a socially accepted code for getting high just shows how low the bar is for potheads to run with nonsense. And it is with this nonsense in mind that I begin the binge. 7 stoner stories to sate the sativa sillies. Let's kick things off old school. In the 1930s, a group of Bible-thumping fun haters decided to fund a film to warn parents about the dangers of the most evil scourge to their families, the dread marijuana. I think they didn't like it because it sounded Mexican. Reefer Madness was released in 1936, and it's full of wholly unsupported claims, erroneous statements, and outright lies. It's basically the blueprint for Fox News. The opening text crawl plays their whole hand, calling marijuana a violent narcotic, despite being neither narcotic nor traditionally inciting violence. The text continues, talking about the horrible effects of dancing with the devil's lettuce, violent, uncontrollable laughter. Okay, half a point, but why do they hate laughter? Dangerous hallucinations, the total inability to direct thoughts. This seems like a big reach. I want to see their studies. Leading to acts of shocking violence, ending often in incurable insanity. That's right, folks. Don't touch the grass, or you'll lose your mind like you're having a staring contest with Cthulhu. The plot is straightforward enough. Some kids in their 20s and 30s, who all wear suits all the time, are led to the cleanest and brightest den of iniquity ever brought to black and white, where some evil pushers give them weed and they instantly get addicted. But at no point do any of the kids pay for this service. All the kids are identical, none of them come across as children. The A-plot revolves around a bland generic white dude, Bill, getting framed for the murder of his girlfriend by the head pusher, who was dumb enough to use a loaded gun as a melee weapon and accidentally killed the girl, turning a simple fist fight into an Operation Teardown. This is just bad business. Bill gets set up, weed melted his brain so he doesn't remember that he didn't kill his lady friend, a laughably poor trial ensues, and Bill is convicted. But about 10 minutes later, the head pusher gets beaten to death by Patrick Bateman, and his lady friend confesses to the real events that went down before taking a swan dive out a courthouse window. Bill is saved from the chair, but still ruined. Multiple people are dead. The town is shaken by tragedy. The whole thing is framed by an extremely heavy-handed preaching about how the PTA needs to mobilize to keep marijuana from schools, because they're definitely the ones responsible, not, say, some federal authority who sets laws and things. The whole thing's hysterically over the top, and funny enough that NORML, the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, revived it in the 70s to show at fundraisers on college campuses promoting legalization, which is how a weird piece of propo has survived 90 years and remains available on streaming services. There's a lot more insanity crammed in a 65-minute runtime, like the casual mention of a kid smoking dope and then killing his whole family with an axe. But if you strip out the over-the-top weed shaming and sub in something that fits their intended effects better, like benzos or PCP, this could have been a solid flick. The acting is fine, the camera's in focus, the story's coherent. It's too bad about all the bullshit. Summary. It's old, it's stilted, and it's sometimes frustratingly obvious propaganda. But it's a good time watching how historically incorrect this movie gets the impact of weeds. My next flick was a classic from the turn of the decade. A couple delinquents with a band hit the road and have madcap adventures they're only partially aware of, while a known actor hunts them ineptly with notable car chases. No, it's not the Blues Brothers, it's Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke. Put out in 1978, 2 years before Blues Brothers, this oddly constructed pile of scenes reminded me enough of Jake and Elwood's Mission from God that I was sure they'd borrowed pages. Cheech Marin is Pedro, a guy who lives in a constant haze of pot smoke in the barrio, possibly with 3 children who may be his, though we never meet their mother. Tommy Chong doesn't get a name. He's credited as Man. He starts the movie with a couple rich old white people yelling at him about getting a job, and he decides instead to hit the road in his busted ass Beetle with a Rolls Royce grill strapped to it. The pair meet up when Chong hitches a ride from Pedro, and the two spend the next 80 minutes either smoking or searching for weed. Along the way, they run across Stacy Keach, the worst cop outside of the Keystone State, who is desperately trying to land a drug bust. There's a house party, a lady snorts drain cleaner and makes funny faces. They get deported on purpose. There's a poop joke that runs about 10 minutes too long. And the duo eventually ends up driving a truck built entirely out of marijuana back to LA without ever realizing they're sitting in their own paradise. Finally, they end up in a battle of the bands while their pot truck burns outside and drive off into the sunset in a cloud of smoke. Does that sound messy? Disjointed? Mostly like nonsense? Yeah? Then I got the tone of this flick dead on. Scenes don't end, they just stop. They don't transition, you're just not there anymore. Nothing has a purpose. The main character's drive begins and ends with, we need to get some more hash. Oh, Tom Skerritt's in this mess. Dallas from Alien shows up for about 5 minutes as a shell-shocked veteran. It goes nowhere, but somehow it's still fun. And that's the reality of Up in Smoke, and probably why it did well. It's a wonky slop of a movie, but it was fun throughout, so long as you let yourself abandon logic and plot. And in many ways, it's a better anti-dope PSA than Reefer Madness. Everyone in this movie is dirty and lost and meandering and oblivious, and it looks like a miserable way to be, at least from the outside. Cops always on your ass, the eternal struggle to find weed, always being poor. Unless you're a white high schooler in Texas, I guess. The kids from Dazed and Confused didn't seem to have any issues getting their fix. Despite looking like it was shot in the late 70s, Richard Linklater's Ode to His Teenage Years actually came out in 1993. It's packed with future star talent. Rory Cochrane, who went on to anchor Empire Records, Joey Lauren Adams, whose squeaky voice didn't stop her from a solid career in Kevin Smith films, Anthony Rapp, who folks of a certain age might remember from a little 80s babysitting misadventure, but most people know from his star turn in Rent, Parker Posey, co-star in half the indie flicks of the 1990s, eventually peaking in Blade Trinity, Ben Affleck in his usual early career role as a walking cock people love to hate, and introducing Matthew McConaughey as Wooderson, everyone's favorite child predator. We'll get to that. Leading the pack is Jason London, the superior actor of the London twins, but that's not saying much, along with Wiley Wiggins, who, well, he's a game designer now, and that's better for everyone. Dazed and Confused doesn't really have a plot so much as happen. It follows an ensemble of high school and soon-to-be high school kids on the last day of classes in a Texas suburb. We've got jocks like Cole Hauser's Benny and Ben Stiller's second-try senior O'Banion. We've got nerds, Anthony Rapp and Adam Goldberg, talking about politics and the future and how thinking impairs their ability to enjoy life. We've got the stoners, like Rory Cochrane, just moving through life in a cloud of pot smoke. We've got freshmen, Mitch, played by Wiley Wiggins, and his pals, who were targeted for beatings by the incoming senior class, as societal acceptance of hazing was even higher than societal acceptance of being hazed. And tying them all together is London, as Randall Pink Floyd, star QB and friend to all. We run through the end of the school day to the early morning hours. As the kids plan to party, the party gets busted, the party gets moved, the entire town's youth population gets wasted in the woods. The usual. Now, we should probably talk about the poorly aging elephant in the room. Matty Max Wooderson is the guy who graduated but still hangs around the old haunts with the teens, talking about how much he loves high school girls. When he's 19, maybe that's okay. When he's mid-20s, not so much okay anymore. Especially when he's inquiring about the new crop of freshmen. Yick. But McConaughey plays him with such charm and style that we still like him despite the fact that he's a cradle-robbing creep. 70s, man. Look, this movie's great. Linklater put in real effort here, and it shows. The film is shot in the style of the era it was set, and the costumes and set design and cinematography are so convincing, I didn't realize this wasn't from the 70s until my third watch. But to be fair, I was like 11 when this came out. The dialogue feels natural, and the characters feel real, and even without living in the days depicted, it feels nostalgic. But there's one major problem. Carl. Fucking Carl. Carl is one of Mitch's pals at the start of the movie. A little freshman dickhead constantly leaves his friends to get assaulted while he runs off and faces no consequences. He asks Mitch to take one for the team. He drags poor Hirschfelder out of the rec center, and he was getting there. He tosses the communal beer into the street. Carl is a little asshole, and he never gets his comeuppance. Well, not on film. The actor spent the next 20 years doing guest spots on crappy TV. I guess a one-off on Charmed is punishment enough. As for the 420 of it all, weed is everywhere in this flick. Pickford sells it. Everyone smokes it. Nearly every scene has someone who is high or is getting high or is trying to get high. There are no repercussions from it. Somewhere between 1930 and 1990, attitudes toward pot shifted. The population seemed to embrace it in the 60s and 70s. It became pretty clear that the stuff didn't turn users into maniacal killers or incurable lunatics, and enforcement was instead directed at supporting systemic racism as a tool to incarcerate minorities. But that gets a little heavy for this cast. For our purposes, as the decades go by, weed is less counterculture and more just culture. Fewer and fewer stoner movies were made into the aughts, and by the 20 teens, when legalization and decriminalization were rolling across the states, the genres just sort of dried up. Like the old beer bash classics from Dean Martin to Animal House, the behavior was so common, there's just not much to make a movie about there. Luckily, the interim decades were rife with options. Next on the list, Dave Chappelle's finest hour and a half, Half Baked. Released in 98, half decade before Chappelle ended up one of the most overquoted men in America, and a decade before he went batshit. Half Baked is the tale of Thurgood Jenkins and his pack of stoner pals, who become pot dealers to raise bail money for their buddy who's been locked up for fatally giving snacks to a police horse. It starts with their introduction to the ganja as kids, jumps to their more modern-day low-ambition lives in their 20s, and ends with a kung fu fight against leather-clad lady minions of a drug kingpin. And this is one of the more grounded films I watched in the binge. I'm not going to run the whole plot here because there's little enough of it. But the hour and a half is packed with memorable jokes and solid visual gags, even if you're sober. It's also packed tighter than a Bowl at a Dead show with cameos. Bob Saget sucks dick for coke. Willie Nelson remembers when a dime bag cost a dime. Snoop pops in to bum a toke. Jon Stewart tells us about the hidden action on the back of a $20 bill. Janine Garofalo writes bad poetry. Stephen Baldwin proves he should have been in the MacGyver reboot. Stephen Wright eternally crashes on the sofa. And Tommy Chong wrangles squirrels. He gets a name in this movie, unlike Up in Smoke. And Squirrel Master has more agency in his 5 minutes of screen time than Man does in all of the earlier flick. Chappelle takes a minute to explain the different types of marijuana users. The first film in the series to acknowledge that not everyone who gets lit on occasion is a total burnout, which is where we get most of our slate of star smokers. This one aged well. The jokes still land and it looks good. The effects that look cheesy are supposed to, and the light tone and plot help it go down with no coffin fits. Well, most of the jokes still land. 30 years later, does anyone remember dead presidents? A common thread through all these flicks has been that stoners can't remember shit. So maybe it makes sense that film execs forgot about the cinematic war crime that was Dude, Where's My Car? And gave director Danny Leaner another chance to make his buddy road comedy. He did a lot better with Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle in 2004. If it weren't for the title and the trailers and the credits rolling at the start, this flick could have had a great psych-out opening. We start with a besooted Ethan Embry moping while looking at a photo of a woman when his D-bag chooch finance bro buddy walks into his office and snatches it away, ripping him about getting over his breakup and convincing him to go out in the town to get wild. Embry's a recognizable enough star that he could have been the lead of this party flick, and the setup's cliche. It wouldn't be a good movie, but it seems like the start of something. But then we meet our real star. John Cho is Harold, a low-level number cruncher at some finance firm. The douche pushes Embry to offload his work onto Sulu, and the duo of privileged white dudes disappear until the end of the movie. Next, we meet Cal Penn, Kumar, who is acing an interview for med school until he answers a phone call and intentionally tanks it. He's clearly some kind of medical genius here, but he's not interested in pursuing the occupation. As he says, just because you're hung like a moose doesn't mean you need to go into porn. Turns out these two are odd couple roommates. Taj is the gifted, carefree slacker. Spike is the driven, put-upon, by-the-book guy. But they bond by getting baked together. And then catch a commercial for White Castle, which convinces their weed-addled brains that the refuse sandwiches they sell here are not only edible, but essential. This kicks off their wacky road trip of misfortune as they try and fail to just get something to eat. On their quest, they encounter late 90s extreme assholes preppy British girls with gastrointestinal problems, racist cops, Christopher Maloney in massive prosthetics, Malin Ackerman's boobs. Remember her? She was great in Final Girls. Systemic racial injustice, and eventually beta test Barney Stinson. Neil Patrick Harris plays a hookers and blow loving version of himself in this movie stealing cameo that must have been a factor in him landing the How I Met Your Mother gig a year after this came out. After a long night of existential and physical crises, the pair make it to their destination and devour an unsafe amount of White Castle. Sorry, spoilers. And have catharsis rather than diarrhea like most people who eat there. Carol and Kumar too probably should have been at the GI doc. Just saying. H&K GTWC is still amusing, even if it feels dated and a lot of it's just insane. Leaner went full nuts with aliens and cults and dude, but managed to turn the dial back to about 20% for this one. I can only guess how great this movie could have been without riding a fucking cheetah or a 10-minute conversation about Maloney's boils. Here's a fun fact. Just a few years after making a hit movie about getting stoned and questing for rancid sliders, Kal Penn took a gig working for Obama in the White House. How's that for where do you see yourself in 5 years? It's possible that any complaints I have about these movies are only because I was watching them sober. But is that really a defense? This movie's great. You just have to be 30% conscious for it to work right. It could also be a cultural disconnect. I don't live in the stoner world. Maybe I just don't get it. But my next pick was closer to home. Gamer nerds and tech jobs? That should be familiar, right? If only real life were more like Grandma's Boy. Released in 2006, Nana's Lad was written by and stars Alan Covert and Nick Swardson, along with Barry Wernick, who also wrote Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place. Covert plays Alex, a mid-30s QA staffer at a fictional game company that looks a lot more fun and less sexual harassy than most mid-aughts dev shops. He's living a perfect stoner life. Plays video games by day, gets lit and plays video games by night. But when Rob Schneider evicts him from his home because his roommate's been spending their rent on hookers, 10-second Tom is forced to move in with his grandmother and her Golden Girls rejects. Meanwhile, his office life is disrupted when his boss, Kevin Nealon, hires a new PM to keep things on track. Linda Cardellini, apparently bored of being a nerd wrangling a stoner slacker detective, plays a nerd wrangling a pack of stoner slacker devs. Hawkeye's wife only has to deal with mild inappropriate behavior from the pack of immature males in her new workplace, and of course it's not long before she and our hero hit it off, much to the distress of lead developer and escapee from the Matrix, JP, played by Joel David Moore. JP was a child prodigy. He made a hit video game as a kid and left school before learning social skills, so he's awkward and off-putting and emotionally immature. So he's the clear villain, because we don't try to help those who get left behind. We isolate and mock them until they lash out. It's okay, though. It's not punching down because he's rich. You can't be developmentally stunted and rich, right? Right? Anyhow, after a rager party at Gigi's crib, the centerpiece of the movie, really, the ill-equipped savant reaches out to Alex in what seems like a great moment of character growth. But it's handled about as delicately as the thrown bong in the movie's opening. And our leather trench-coated loser tries to steal a project game our protagonist has been working on for years. Now, I'm no coder, but I'm pretty sure of a few things. A, you can't develop directly on an Xbox. 2, you never have only one copy of your code. D, you can't get a publication deal by taking a single playable demo disc to an exec. Okay, maybe I'm wrong on the last one. Anyhow, Graham has to save the day by dueling the gamer nerd prodigy in a weird single-player, third-person action game that is somehow also a deathmatch title, and prove ownership because no one involved in this has ever played a video game. Madden doesn't count here. This Happy Madison production stars a lot of supporting players from Adam Sandler's 90s hits, Covert and Swardson, of course, but also Peter Dante and Jonathan Loren, who are recognizable as, oh, that guy in most Sandler flicks. And also Jonah Hill for some reason. For its faults, Grandma's Boy is an amusing flick that shows that Sandler's formula works even when he's not present. Covert is a likable lead, and while it's not deep or smart, the script is tight and the movie moves quick, with plenty of solid gags. It's an underappreciated nugget here. And finally, rebounding from underrated to overhyped, we have the misery of my day. I fucking hate Pineapple Express. Look, it's been a couple days since I watched all these movies now, and I've had time to think about it, and that's my conclusion. While I was watching, it felt off somehow. Rogen's playing a familiar role, aimless, affable stoner, but there are edges here that just don't need to be. Why is he dating a high schooler? Why give him a job that makes him unlikable? Why is he only dumb when the plot calls for it? Franco is dumb throughout, but at least he's consistent. I just hate Saul. He's an oblivious asshole and everything just sort of works out for him. Shit just happens around him and mostly he does nothing, but when he does act, it tends to make things worse. But I'm getting into characters before the plot. Does it matter? Fucking probably not. But let's do this like an unpaid professional. Pinehammer Empress is a 2008 action comedy written by Rogan and Evan Goldberg, produced by Judd Apatow, and directed by David Gordon Green, who also helmed comedic masterpieces like George Washington, Joe, the reboot Halloween series. Oh, look, he directed Your Highness. No wonder I hate this. So, Rogan is Dale Denton, a process server who is hooked on talk radio, dates a high school girl, and smokes a lot of pot. Franco is Saul, Dale's pot dealer, who has smoked himself into semi-functional idiocy. Let me be clear here. I don't think smoking the reefer makes everyone into a dumbass, but that's how Franco plays it. So, Cal swings by Tommy Wiseau's place after work to grab a re-up, and the disaster artist sells him some special hybrid, the titular Pan Pebble Arrest. And then they have an awkward interaction for like 10 minutes that neither Dale nor I could get out of fast enough. Rogan wrote this shit. He shouldn't look so uncomfortable filming it, right? Moving on. Knocked Up heads to serve some papers to a guy who happens to share a name with Harry Osborn's supplier. What a coincidence. And witnesses Officer Rosie Perez and Lumberg from Office Space shooting the guy in the head in a glass fucking house. Because even smart people in this movie are really stupid. Sausage Party freaks out and hits a couple of cars over and over again because that's about as subtle as things get here. And of course, drops his joint of highly identifiable strain of superweed on the street. Now, being a sane, sober, functional member of society, he does the smart thing and immediately calls this into the wait, hold on. Checking my notes. Nope. He goes back to his drug dealer so they can shout at each other a lot and then drive into the woods with no supplies except a big bag of weed. Meanwhile, Lumberg is called on his goons, Craig T. Nelson and Billy Corrigan. Nope, that's not right. Craig Robinson and Kevin Corrigan, and sends them to find the owner of the discarded roach on the street. This should be an impossible task, locating the owner of a discarded joint. But to paraphrase the great Ryan George, it is instead super easy, barely an inconvenience. After narrowly missing the two morons at 127 Hours Place, the pair of thugs head to the guy just up the chain in the drug distro, Danny Boyle, or Danny McBride. Hey, is this constantly being dumb and getting things wrong funny? Maybe running a bit thin? Well, that's this whole goddamn movie. Fuck's sake. I can't step by step this one anymore, okay? These two morons go to McBride's place and have a really stupid fight with him and then leave. The goons show up again and shoot him, the first of like 11 times he should die in this movie but doesn't. More shit happens, but nothing matters. Eventually, Oz the Great and Powerful gets captured by the bad guys, and the third act turns into the weirdest paced, strangely shot action set piece ever thrown into a pothead comedy movie. In the end, our two stoned assholes escaped an abandoned military bunker used for pot experiments in the 30s just before it blows up, with their immortal pal eastbound and down, and have a wholly unnecessary diner scene where they recap their favorite parts of the fucking movie while pretending there's an emotional arc in this shit show. This movie is weirdly paced, the characters are unlikable, the plot is thin, and the whole thing is ugly. It's brown and beige and blah. I think it's set in the present. They've got cell phones, but every location and vehicle and wardrobe choice looks like it was taken from a period piece set in 78. A lot of people seem to like this movie. It's definitely not high enough to join that group. Put Apatow in the director's spot here, maybe this works better. All the angles are here, but they're played too straight. I'll give him points for the opening shot, though. Bill Hader slays as a soldier smoking a blunt dubbed Item 9 in an isolation room while being observed by James Remar and a crew of stuffy authority types. They send a guy in a full diver suit to spark his joint. It's funny and clever and unexpected and speaks of the attitude towards the dread marijuana in the 30s. And that's the last laugh this shit show got out of me. And there it is. 420 Fest. So much smoke, I think I got a contact high through the screen. If I were schlockier, I'd give these movies some hokey rating using a system like from swag to dank, but that's like a 2 blunts out of 10 idea. Short recap, because I've been told repeatedly that potheads can't remember shit. Reefer Madness is batshit propo, funny in retrospect. Up in Smoke is incoherent but amusing, like a hazy vision of the Blues Brothers. Dazed and Confused is a time capsule of a very specific guy's late 70s experience, and somehow resonates because that guy happened to be a hell of a filmmaker and pull a great cast. Half-Baked is just some good, clean, slightly dank fun. Harold and Kumar is a better Dude Where's My Car that's still kind of funny, but feels every bit the 2 decades old it is. Grandma's Boy deserves a watch if you or someone you know is a big nerd. Pineapple Express can get fucked with a World War II grenade. And that's the bit, folks. I can't do any more with this lot. Time to start into the next batch. I need a vacation, maybe a tropical trip. As always, you can send comments, complaints, suggestions, etc. to octoberfestcast@gmail.com or leave a comment at octoberfest.substack.com. Rebuttals of my Peen Huffer expats take will be ignored. Until next time, keep it all right, all right, all right.